In the 1802 edition of the American Practical Navigator, Nathaniel Bowditch wrote that tropical cyclones merit special attention by mariners, warning that the rapidity with which weather deteriorates and the violence of a fully developed storm are difficult to imagine without personal experience. A well-worn copy of that book sat in the library of the battleship USS New Jersey in December 1944. On board was Commander George Cosco, chief aerologist for the United States Navy's Third Fleet. He was responsible for predicting weather patterns in the Pacific, but he had no idea that the most powerful naval armada on Earth was sailing directly into the heart of a deadly, fast-moving typhoon. By late 1944, the tide of World War II in the Pacific had shifted decisively in favor of the Allies. Following crushing victories at the Battle of the Philippine Sea and Leyte Gulf, the Imperial Japanese Navy was severely battered. The U.S. Navy was pushing relentlessly toward the Japanese home islands, with Task Force 38 serving as its primary strike force. Under the command of aggressive Admiral William "Bull" Halsey, this massive fleet boasted 7 fleet carriers, 6 light carriers, 8 battleships, dozens of cruisers, and roughly 50 destroyers. Their immediate mission was to provide crucial air support for General Douglas MacArthur's upcoming invasion of Mindoro in the Philippines. Operations of this scale required immense logistical support. On December 16, Task Force 38 rendezvoused with a replenishment group consisting of oilers, tugs, and escort carriers. Refueling at sea was routine, but it left ships vulnerable to rough waters. This was particularly true for the fleet's destroyers. Over the course of the war, these smaller warships had been retrofitted with heavy anti-aircraft guns, radar suites, and additional top-weight equipment. As a result, they were notoriously top-heavy. When their fuel reserves ran low, their hulls rode high in the water, making them severely unstable. Normally, crews would fill empty fuel tanks with seawater as ballast to lower the ship's center of gravity. However, because these destroyers were queued up to receive fresh oil, they had flushed their tanks, leaving them exceptionally buoyant and precarious in heavy seas. On the morning of December 17, refueling operations began, but conditions deteriorated rapidly. Heavy swells tossed the ships around, causing lines to snap and making close-quarters maneuvers extremely dangerous. Despite worsening weather, fleet forecasters failed to realize the severity of what was approaching. Weather forecasting in 1944 relied heavily on historical trends and observational reports radioed from distant stations. Because the incoming storm was unusually compact, its true nature remained hidden. Early warning scouting reports sent from flying boats off Saipan were misread or delayed. Forecasters believed they were dealing with an ordinary squall rather than an escalating typhoon. By early afternoon, Halsey called a temporary halt to refueling, ordering ships that could not take on fuel to ballast down with seawater. Yet several destroyers, including the USS Spence, USS Hickox, and USS Maddox, were critically low on fuel, some down to just 10% capacity. Fearing that taking on seawater would pollute their fuel tanks and delay refueling if a brief weather window opened, captains hesitated, clinging to the hope of getting vital oil. This delay would prove catastrophic. Attempting to escape the rough weather and find calm waters to complete refueling, Halsey issued a series of course changes throughout the day and evening. Tragically, because the fleet lacked accurate information about the storm's trajectory, these course adjustments did not steer Task Force 38 away from danger. Instead, they placed the fleet directly in the path of the storm, which would come to be known as Typhoon Cobra. By midnight on December 17, barometers across the fleet plummeted to terrifying lows. On some ships, operators using newly installed radar equipment observed a strange, dense mass appearing on their screens, among the first times in history a major tropical storm was tracked via radar. By the morning of December 18, the core of Typhoon Cobra slammed into Task Force 38 with full fury, bringing sustained winds exceeding 100 knots and monstrous churning seas. The storm mercilessly battered the fleet's light aircraft carriers, built on converted light cruiser hulls. On the USS Langley, the ship rolled a jaw-dropping 70 degrees before righting itself. On the USS Monterey, violent rolling caused parked fighter planes in the hangar deck to break free from their heavy tie-downs. Aircraft smashed into bulkheads, rupturing fuel tanks and sparking an inferno deep inside the ship. Trapped in darkness as dense smoke filled the engine rooms, the crew faced imminent destruction. A young gunnery officer on board, future U.S. President Gerald R. Ford, narrowly avoided being swept overboard when he slid across the flight deck and caught a catwalk margin. Through immense discipline, Captain Stuart Ingersoll ordered all remaining steam redirected to fight the flames, successfully saving the ship. For the unballasted destroyers, the situation was far grimmer. Low on fuel and lacking seawater ballast, the USS Spence fought desperately against towering waves. Water poured into her ventilation ducts, shorting out electrical distribution boards. Her rudder jammed, her pumps failed, and a final massive swell rolled her onto her port side. Within minutes, the Spence sank, taking 317 men with her and leaving only 23 survivors. The USS Hull, overburdened with 500 tons of wartime modifications, was pinned down by 110-knot winds. As water poured into her stack, she capsized shortly after noon, resulting in the loss of 202 crew members. Nearby, the decorated destroyer USS Monaghan, veteran of 12 battle stars and the Pearl Harbor attack, suffered power failure when her engine room flooded. Unballasted and dead in the water, she rolled over into the boiling sea, leaving only 6 survivors out of 262 men. Amid the chaos, incredible acts of heroism emerged. Lieutenant Commander Henry Plage, commanding the small destroyer escort USS Tabarer, braved 60-foot seas despite losing his ship's mast and radio antennas. Refusing to retreat, Plage conducted a daring search over 51 hours, pulling 55 freezing sailors from shark-infested waters. In total, Typhoon Cobra sank 3 destroyers, damaged 27 other vessels, destroyed 146 aircraft, and claimed 790 American lives, inflicting more damage on the Third Fleet than the Japanese Navy had managed in months. A naval court of inquiry later held Halsey accountable for errors in judgment, though no formal disciplinary action was taken due to his stellar war record and the unprecedented conditions. The disaster led to major structural redesigns for U.S. warships and established the Navy's Joint Typhoon Warning Center, ensuring that nature would never again ambush the fleet in the Pacific.